Hello, everybody. My name is Jeff Steinberg. Joining me is John Hofel. Hold your seats because we have already entered into yet another, even more dramatic phase of the breakdown of the entire global financial system. The world was shocked with the announcement by Dubai World, which is the sovereign wealth fund of Dubai, one of the 7 emirates under the United Arab Emirates, that they were requesting a 6-month debt moratorium on interest payments due to their bondholders. And this immediately set off a crash of markets in Europe, in Asia. And where are we in this, John? Let's walk people through what this story really is versus the cartoon version they'll be getting in the news.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have on the surface, you have this $60 billion or so potential default, and with the British banks being 5 times as exposed as anyone else. But underneath the surface, because Dubai, first of all, anything involving the financial markets, what you see on the surface with bank loans and things like that is just the tip of the iceberg, because there's always the off-balance sheet activities, right, the derivatives, things like that. So you have no idea what the real whole is when you're discussing these things, because it's never what it appears to be on the surface. And then you have the added element here in Dubai of it being a hot money center for that part of the world. It's sort of a Western Asian Hong Kong.
Right.
And so you have enormous dope money flows. It's very closely tied in with Afghanistan and the Afghani drug trade and other things like that.
By the way, I should mention that one of the famous projects owned by Dubai World, which is a conglomerate, they have a lot of real estate interests, shipping interests, banking. There is this project, I think it's actually in Qatar, called the Palm Islands. And these are actually synthetically made islands in a bay, and they each have these sumptuous luxury condominium towers. And from one of our military sources just back from Afghanistan, it seems that 1/3 of the occupancies of these Palm Island condos, probably starting out at $2–3 million each, are ministers and sub-ministers of the Afghanistan government. So you just get an idea that this is going to have interesting ricochet factors back with the newly installed re-elected Karzai government and its promise to fight corruption and things like that. So,
yeah. I mean, and as the hot money flows, it's the Afghani dope trade, the opium trade out of Afghanistan. And it's been historically a free port for that part of the world. So there's been gold trading, all sorts of things. It's basically a port which is a haven of operations for this whole doping criminal apparatus.
I had an opportunity earlier today to speak to a friend who actually lived for 7 years in Dubai from the mid to late 1990s into sometime, probably around 2002, 2003. And he was a journalist, pretty prominent. And so he saw a lot and was privy to certain meetings that took place in the late 1990s when there was a decision made by the British to concentrate all of the hot money operations that had earlier been sort of divvied up among 2 or 3 other places in the Persian Gulf, plus Dubai, plus, as you mentioned, Singapore, Hong Kong, Macau. All of a sudden, the decision was made that Dubai was going to be built up as the concentrated center for these London-directed offshore financial operations. And my friend described to me that there was all kinds of lavish plans that Dubai was going to become the #1 world tourist attraction. And the plans were to build up all of these luxury hotels, with ridiculous kinds of lavish designs, a glass tunnel, a restaurant that actually is underwater in a kind of a protected bubble, all kinds of things that are laughable. He said that the idea of Dubai was that this was going to be, and this was their description, was going to be the pleasure palace for that entire part of the world. And he just said that this was always clearly preposterous from the very beginning, but that this was totally engineered out of London. In fact, every ministry in the government, every financial institution, everything that moves, that has any degree of wealth or power in Dubai, has a deputy director who really runs the show, who is British, not some Arab trained at London University or London School of Economics, but British nationals dispatched to actually run the show and administer on behalf of the City of London this major piece of their offshore haven. So that's what's blown. And as you said, it's Afghan dope money, the famous Dawood Ibrahim, the Indian gangster who ran the underworld in the city of Mumbai, who now lives between Dubai and Karachi, Pakistan, who organized the Mumbai attack of December of last year. This is typical of the kind of things that go on in Dubai. If you want to do something that violates every basic principle of the Quran somewhere in the Persian Gulf region, then you make a beeline for Dubai.
And basically every principle of economics, too.
Sure, exactly.
I mean, you look at these projects. I mean, the Palm Island that you referenced. You have another set of artificial islands called the world.
Right, exactly.
Shaped, built to like a globe of the world.
Right.
And then you have a mall with an indoor ski slope in it.
Yeah.
Out in the desert.
Just what you need.
Then you have these enormous hotels and office buildings and things like that. One of them is almost twice as tall as any other office building in the world.
Right.
And it's so lavish. They spend so much money on this thing. And the idea that you'd ever get that back is just nuts.
Right, exactly. And now it's blown.
Now it's blown.
Now the bubble's blown.
And so, this is the kind of opportunity where the Brits like to do these things where they set people up. You build this. This is going to work. This will really work. And then you build it with your money. It blows up. The Brits come in, buy it up at pennies on the dollar, and clean you out. Except that, the Brits are going broke too, so they may not be able to come up with the pennies on the dollar.
Well, you said that the British banks are 5 times more exposed than anybody else to this Dubai business. We both spoke earlier today to Lyndon LaRouche, and his view of this is that this is exactly typical of the kind of phase that we're in the disintegration of the entire global financial system, and that while we don't know whether this Dubai blowout is going to cause the kind of sequence of other things that bring the whole system down, it's certainly conceivable that this will have that kind of consequence or will move us one very large step closer to that point where the whole thing blows and there's nothing left.
Yeah, and you can see, this is the fact that we're headed in that direction is clearly known. If you look at the pattern of regulatory proposals that are coming out of London, that you can see that what's actually they're preparing for a collapse of the banking system, that they want to streamline the way in which the imperial banks can eat the rest of the banking system in order to try to manage this banking collapse and improve their position, to let them take over the world. I mean, this push out of Britain for a Tobin tax, the transaction tax on derivatives, and other things, which is, in my view, what this really is this is a step towards the first global tax for this global financial dictatorship that they want to take. You start off by putting this tax in with the governments, but ultimately the tax transfers to being collected by this international agency.
But in the meantime, what we're actually seeing in terms of the real process is the perfect exemplification of the break point in Lyndon LaRouche's triple curve, where the hyperinflation in terms of monetary aggregates, the collapse of financial aggregates relatively, and the precipitous continuing collapse of global real production that is the recipe for a dark age. And that's really where we're headed right now.
Yeah, I mean, they can play all the financial games that they want. And they're very good at stringing things out, at hiding losses and all of that. But you have this accelerating collapse of the real economy underneath it.
Right.
And so the foundation upon which all these games, which can only continue for a certain period anyway, but the foundation upon which they're based is crumbling.
Right.
So you have this disintegration process, this global breakdown, in which their plans don't work either because nothing really works like it used to anymore.
Right.
And their capability to manipulate affairs is actually breaking apart in a very interesting way.
Now let's take one of the aspects of that, which